Welcome everyone to this session on national fellowships, applying for national fellowships. If you've got questions, just put them in the chat. We've got a couple of people monitoring, and so we'll answer them as we go along. And just FYI, you don't need to be taking copious notes because I've got a QR code where you can download the slides later on. I'm Dr. Sally Stedman, and I'm an adjunct faculty at the University of South Alabama. And I guess, experts are somebody that lives 50 miles away and you bring in to talk about something. But I have had positions at the South Alabama. I was a fellowship coordinator for a number of years, and that organization has a national organization similar to Mortar Board, fellowship advisors, and so I've attended their meetings, national conferences. So there are a lot of people out there, and I will point you at some of them later on, that can help you with this topic. I've reviewed for a number of programs, including Mortar Board. Actually ran the program, the fellowship program, before Kate McKenzie took over. Who's in the audience this afternoon. And I've reviewed for NSF, the National Defense, NDSEG, National Defense SMART, AAUW, Associated of University Women. I've reviewed for Phi Kappa Phi. Katie, I didn't review your applications, it was a few years ago. So I've reviewed for a number, and I'm currently the fellowship coordinator for the Engineering Honor Society, Tau Beta Pi, where we award 30+ fellowships a year. What makes me feel like I know something about this topic is through those review processes, I've probably looked at 2,000+ applications. And once you start reading applications, you see things that stand out to you. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Other people that have joined us that are going to help out, because I'm going to call on them because they were on the other side. We have two recipients for the fellowships this year, and that's Annie Massia. Hi, Annie. And she's also a brand new section coordinator. Congratulations. Kristen Welsh.
Hello, everybody.
And then as Katie, some of you came in on as Katie was introducing herself, so Selski was a recipient last year, and as Kay pointed out, Jason Baker was a recipient the year before. So we've got some experts here, and they can tell you about the things that they did to make their applications more competitive. So again, if you've got questions, just put them in the chat. I think we've got time, so let's introduce ourselves briefly. Put it in the chat, but don't hit the send button. Put your school and the state that your school is in. And I'll give you a couple minutes to get that typed in. And once you've got it typed in, then I'll give you the signal to post it. So 3, 2, 1. So post yours. Maybe that was too quick. We didn't get too many of them. They scroll by. It's kind of fun to watch that we're spanning from one coast to the other. Lots of Alabama and Hawaii. So thank you all for attending. And I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully. This is always a challenge. And if Annie and Kristen and Katie, you can watch the chat along with Trish. So if we see any questions cropping up, you can get those just interrupt me with. Sorry, I'm not good at multitasking. So feel free to reach out to me. My email address is sstedman. If you've got questions later on, I'm happy to answer them. Just let me know. Yeah. I told Trish when we tried this works. Okay, fine. And now it's not working. Okay, national fellowships. In generally, they're highly competitive. They're not dependent upon GPA, but in the number of presentations that I've done both at South Alabama and nationally for other organizations, if you don't have a GPA above a 3.75, you're going to have a great story. That doesn't mean that you won't get an award, but if you look like everybody else and have a lower GPA, that's probably going to screen you out. The reason I do this is that it's a lengthy process, and there's no sense in spending all that time if at the end you don't get what you wanted out of the process. It's a serious time commitment. And some students report it's life-changing. So the three of you, how much time did you spend on your application? Let's talk about first from Mortarboard.
You mean mortarboard itself or the application itself?
The application for the fellowship.
Yeah, so the application, like for me personally, I think I received an email about it in January, but I think I started thinking about it in December. So like between like contacting references and doing just like sections of the application, I think it was it was January, February, March. So 3 months. I broke it down into sections.
So 100 hours probably isn't an exaggeration.
No.
Annie?
Yeah, I'd probably say I was gonna be closer to 70 to 80, but like still high in there.
And Katie?
I definitely think so. I don't know how much time for each specific one, but part of law school applications, I think grad school applications in general, you do a lot of the work. But I do think each individual one is a process because you have to tailor your application to whatever the fellowship is. So some of the hours are overlapping, like you're creating products that you can probably use in other areas, but a lot of it is a very serious time commitment to each fellowship.
And good, because that's a good segue for a few slides later on, because I'm going to talk about how you can leverage the process itself. Okay.
Ellie Shaw Gill has a question.
Okay.
So we need to have a GPA that's greater than 3.75 to apply for this?
No. If you joined a little bit late, I said, in general, that's a rule. That if your GPA is lower than that, you need a good story.
You need a good story, okay.
Yeah, it's, and we'll talk about how you can make it more competitive. But the reason I do that is that I don't want my students wasting their time. Okay, now my screen is not advancing. Okay. And I see I repeated that again, probably to do it. You need to show that you've got scholarly potential. So those other good stories are that you've done research and that you've found the next cure for cancer. Well, everyone's going to award you a fellowship if that's true. So if you've done other things that compensate for that GPA, another thing that you can do is take graduate level classes, and your recommendation says this person is in this class of 50 graduate students and they're outperforming all of them. That's a story. That's the things that will compensate for the GPA. So scholarly potential, all of them are looking for that. And the other things, you have to look at the application itself to see what they are focusing on and what they are looking for to reward. I mentioned research, leadership. There are awards for leadership activities. The Truman is an undergraduate scholarship, but the purpose of the Truman is to develop potential national leaders and network amongst those leaders. Service, study abroad. So the various activities all feed into your application. So the process itself can open doors to further opportunities. And that's probably one of the most important things for you to focus on when you're putting this application together. It's going to help you develop some life skills. Your writing skills are going to be very important as you graduate and transition into the workforce. Often you'll have networking opportunities. One of those is with your mentor. And sometimes you win a fellowship. So all of these are things not to deter you from applying when you assess what your chances are, because all of them are going to make you more competitive in the future.
It
So,
looks like Tamika has a question.
okay.
Hi, I'm sorry, and I'm not sure if you've already gotten to this or not, but I come across the question about volunteering in a lot of the fellowship and scholarship applications. And I always get a little confused here when it comes to the volunteering piece. Like when I think of the phrase volunteering, I think of volunteering at like a local vet center, or, volunteering at a hospital or something. What are all the different avenues that may qualify as volunteering? Like, for example, volunteering to help out with your organization's like conference, is that a volunteering sort of thing, or is it only supposed to be volunteering kind of to those in need in some way? I guess is my question.
That, specifically, if they ask you about your volunteer efforts, you would want to include all of them. But if it's, you need to tailor your application to the fellowship itself. So if you are, Katie, you mentioned that you're in law school. So if you've had any volunteer efforts or work experience in a legal office, or maybe working with legal aid, those are things that would be relevant to put in. If you volunteered at Habitat for Humanity and you're going into law, well, that shows you have a servant's heart, but that may not be something that's recognized. You should include it, all of your volunteer activities, but it should be tailored to the particular application. So good question, what you leave in and because I think all of you, did you have to leave things out of your applications? I'm getting uniform nods because there isn't room. Most of them, when I reviewed for Phi Kappa Phi, each member on the panel read every application, 160 of them, which were 25 pages plus. So most of the organizations that are awarding them cut down the amount of material that has to be read. So you have to decide what's important to put in there and what isn't.
I can add a little bit to that. My campus fellowship director always said that your application is a story. And so you're writing that story to the specific fellowship. And so some chapters of my life don't necessarily, they aren't part of this story. They're still important to me and they're still important to who I am, but they might not be part of this story. So that's kind of how I always thought about fellowship applications.
And I think jumping off of what Katie's saying, it's one story. It's not 3 stories. Even if they all apply to what you're applying to, you have to pick one because of the cohesion. I know Dr. Stedman goes into this a little later in this presentation. Cohesion is key because if you're getting lost writing it, then the fellowship person that's reviewing it is going to get lost reading it, and then your chances go way down.
Perfect. The next couple of slides, I list a few of these, the ones that I put on this page are STEM related. And for those of you that haven't started this process, I hope you have, but if you started looking, the National Science Foundation, NDSEG, SMART, all three offer fellowships at the $37,000 level for 3 out of the next 5 years. So you can take a gap year and do something else and come back or get funding from your school. Plus tuition, that's not included in there. And most of them, there's some travel monies for you to participate in conferences. So this isn't a small amount of money. GEM is a program for minority students in engineering, and it's specific to the Big 10 plus schools. International scholarships, the Rhodes Scholarship, Marshall Scholarship, Mitchell. DAD is a German equivalent of NSF, and Fulbright grants. So this is just a smattering. The National Association of Fellowship Advisors puts out a booklet for fellowship advisors, and there's close to 100 fellowships that they have in that booklet. They talk about how many applicants and what's required in the application and what the success rate is. So there's a lot of information available. It's not just these few. One caveat that I need to make at this point, I'm going to be talking about having help in your application at various stages. The Rhodes Scholarship, if those of you are intending to apply for the Rhodes Scholarship, you have to sign an affidavit that you didn't get any outside help. So it's for the rest of them, you can have as many people look at your application, read it, but not Rhodes. So let's talk about mortarboard, and then we will go on about how to structure your application. But this last year, we made 9 awards. When I looked on the website, I thought I remembered 8, and I remembered wrong, and they weren't all listed, but they are this morning. So if you go out there, you'll see Annie as well as another student from my chapter. And Kristen is in there, and then 6 other people. And they're, oh, I'm missing a dollar sign. They're $3,000 to $5,000. Depending upon the stock market. The deadline is March 15th, and we'll talk about that, but that's a time that you'll want to have firmly entrenched. Most of the applications, I think mortarboard's a little forgiving, but I'm familiar with National Science Foundation. If your internet goes down, you're out of luck. So it's a hard deadline. And no excuses and whatever. And so make sure that you know what the deadline is, the time in your time zone or which time zone it is, and get things submitted by the deadline. The mortarboard application, and this is where I'm going to have you guys kind of talk about what you did so you can think about how you're going to talk about this. Has 2 different pieces, I think. I didn't go out there and look. It asks you to talk about your professional goals and your personal goals. And you need to get, Kirsten mentioned letters of recommendation. And mortarboard's a little more specific than most of those programs about who should write your letters. One should address your ability for graduate work. So don't have your mom. I've read letters of recommendations from a dad, from an uncle, and some other relative, and it was like, those are bad. And the other person needs to address your out of classroom experiences, so they have to know you. And they should address your personal qualities and your achievement. They need to know something about you that you put in these letters. So kind of a free-for-all, the 3 of you. Why don't we talk about the application itself and what you thought was important?
I think thinking about the other recipient from our chapter, Ivy Wen, she was not like our chapter president or chapter vice president. And so one of the parts of the mortarboard application is talking about your service to mortarboard and how you want to continue that service. And I think it's really important to look at the juxtaposition of like me as a president, as well as Like I was on a national council committee and things of that nature, which she wasn't, but she was just as committed to our chapter and to furthering mortarboard. So I think looking at that is important. Like if you're just a member of your chapter, don't think that counts you out of applying for this application. You can have just as much like vigor and passion about mortarboard as the next like chapter president.
Yeah, I think for me, like it was just my journey in mortarboard was just so kind of crazy because I went to national conference last year and I was the co-chair membership person, and like I was just thought I would be the last person to go. And so I ended up going and getting immersed into mortarboard, and I loved it so much that I just wanted to do whatever I could to make my chapter successful. But I also had we really weren't given instructions as a board at the time other than like what I learned while I was at national conference. So my goal was just to start fresh and to get everybody on the same page. And we really worked hard to like get our chapter up and running. So I wanted to take all of that information that I learned, especially through fall semester, and like put that into an application. So it was just really cool. But initially, right before I even went to conference, I almost quit mortarboard. So it was just such a crazy journey for me. And so to be able to tell that like little bit of a story, and then also like what I want to do with my career goals as a social worker, and kind of blend everything together, and then get to recommendations from people that really do know, what I'm like, what my work is like, and that kind of thing, which I used an advisor and somebody that's also taught me was a really good idea. And they're people that I trust and will continue to be mentors. So I just think having a plan and asking them ahead of time is super important. Like, I think both of the people I used needed like 3 weeks ahead to like write the references. So I just think that's a big tip, is just like make sure you give them enough time to write these letters.
And I don't remember too much about the specifics of the mortarboard application because it's a little bit further away from me. But I was going to just hop on with letters of recommendation. Same thing, make sure you give people a lot of time. And if they don't ask for details about the fellowship, give them to them and have them like, I want them to know that mortarboard is about scholarship, leadership, and service, and that that's important to me. And then also if they don't know you very well, use it as an opportunity to say, hey, I'd like you to know my story a little bit better. Can I meet with you and talk about my life experiences, what I want to do in grad school, and take advantage of that opportunity. But ideally, you have somebody who already knows all of those things about you. And then I wanted to read a question from the chat. Elizabeth asked, if you will be starting graduate school in the spring, should you wait to apply for fellowships for the fall after you start?
She actually sent that in Hoover, I think yesterday, and I was going to answer, but it's a great question. In general, graduate schools accept people and fund people in the fall. Occasionally you can start in the spring, and even more rare, but it has happened. One of my students applied for a spring admission and actually got funded at a large research institution. So, but in general, fall's the time you start, and fall's when all the awards are made. So, and I think I took those deadlines off. I'm looking now to the deadlines for the NSF and those awards are mid-October. So now's the time to start thinking, but you won't get funding for the fall and spring. It will be for the fall. Some of them you need to be immediately graduated, and some of them are you can apply at any point in your life. Phi Kappa Phi is one of those. Okay, you said you have a Phi Kappa Phi award.
Yes, I did receive a Phi Kappa Phi award. I was on a pretty typical schedule though. I graduated in spring and was starting in fall of the next year. But I was just going to add, I think usually each fellowship has like an eligibility range. So they'll say, we want you to be starting grad school between August of this year to December, or they have a range of months. And so it might be more challenging because some might want you to apply before, some it might be okay to do after. So you just might, I'd like to make like a spreadsheet or a list of like every fellowship I want to apply for and when I need to do it.
And I would definitely reach out to the people that are funding the fellowship, taking the applications and ask them that question, because they do vary. You know, with over 100 of them, they have different requirements. Something that Katie mentioned earlier, and I want to reiterate here, you know, it looks like a lot of work. We talked about those 100 hours plus, but some of it, I heard Katie say she used it for her application for law school. I think, Annie, you've used, since I worked with you, I know that you used it for your application for graduate school. And Kristen, I'm assuming you did the same. So you can pick and choose and move things around and emphasize and de-emphasize, but you know, once you've started an application, it's going to be a lot of headway into the next application. So don't get scared by that. So what makes a good application? And Annie hit on that. The reviewers are whipping through these. I allocate, when I had those 160 and 2 weeks to do them, I mean, that's all I did for 2 weeks. But NSF is almost as brutal. But most of us allocate about 10 minutes per application. So we want to see that unity. We don't want you talking in your personal statement about environmental things, and then you're going to go out and work for an oil company. That's the unification. You know, you need to be talking about how things develop and what you're doing adds to where you intend to be 5-10 years out. Needs to be concise and clear, so don't repeat things. This isn't English class. You know, you need to write a scientific document. Those of you that are in STEM fields have had some technical writing class. That's what you're writing. It needs to be edited and revised. How many revisions did you guys do?
I know that my applications were constantly a work in progress. I thankfully had a close relationship with my fellowship director, but if you can pick somebody else like that, if you're allowed to work on your application with people, and if they will let you send as many drafts as you can, your work will completely change. But I think of every draft as a big, it's a big change, because that's a better version that the reader who's reading my application is going to see. And so I always think if you have time for drafts, it will make your application stronger.
The idea of a working document is, yeah, the idea of a working document, Katie, I completely agree. I also had a really close relationship with our fellowship director at South, Dr. Forbes, and he was just added to my Google Doc. Every once in a while I would just pop in and like look at it. So I would even have to ask him. So yeah, make sure that y'all are making connections with these people, because it can be really helpful to have them in your corner, so that whenever you send them that random draft late at night or early in the morning, they're willing to help you whenever you need it.
So we've hit on that. The strong letters of recommendation, I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, those people know you, and they're going to tell us, you know, what kind of a success you're going to be. And it's not the last point, but it needs to be interesting to the reader. And I'll relate a brief story. One of my students a number of years ago, applying and was awarded an NSF fellowship. When she was a young girl, she grew up in Oregon. Her dad took her to school, and she noticed all the black smoke coming out of the logging trucks and all of what was going on. And they had conversations about combustion and whatnot. She did summer research opportunities with the Army in Detroit, working with ignition systems and whatnot, and just finished her PhD just this last month in combustion. So she had a story. Now, we don't all have those stories to tell, but you know, I still remember the story because it was interesting to me about how her interests were piqued as a young girl. Proofread. I do this class at South Alabama with another one of my mentors, one of my friends, and we both have about the same threshold. 3 typos and it goes in the no pile. I know that sounds brutal, but you know, everybody in your staff is outstanding. So if you've got somebody that can't catch their own typos, that's a reason to push them in the no pile. Address the guidelines. They all have them, and they'll tell you, like Katie said, when you need to start, what kind of programs you need to be pursuing. The deadlines, prepare in advance. Don't wait till the last minute. Look at the eligibility requires, because I just got done doing Tau Beta Pi scholarships for undergraduates, and we had 3 graduate students apply for the scholarships. Well, in the no pile. It wasted their time and ours. But involve your mentor. Annie mentioned Dr. Forbes, you know, by the time you've gotten to where you are in school as a senior, you've undoubtedly developed these relationships. And if not, dig them up real fast. But they're going to help you on your journey. They're going to help you make decisions about your graduate schools, your graduate programs, fellowships, other types of things that you need from them. So, and involve the mentor. Most of them will take the time for stellar students. I'm going to go over this quickly because you can read the slides later on. There are a lot of resources about how you write an essay. But somewhere for graduate school, for professional schools, for fellowships, scholarships, research abroad, you're going to have to write some form of an essay. Did you guys apply for anything that didn't require an essay? So you'll need to delve into how you're going to tell your life story. And this will be a time for you to reflect on where you think you want to go. And I tell my students, this isn't a contract. They don't make you sign on the dotted line and say, yeah, 5 years from now, I'm going to be doing X. It's important that you pick something. You might be interested in 3 things. Pick one and tell your audience why you're passionate about that one thing and how that's going to, you know, the fellowship's going to help you get there. Couple of you mentioned, hopefully most of you have a fellowship office with somebody whose job is to help get national fellowships and scholarships. The Oklahoma State has 12 people in their office that will help you. Most of you have writing centers on your campus, and they will take a look at your work. I like this one from Joel Shaw. He gives you examples of personal statements for different types of applications. And this was a blog that I found a few years ago. There are other blogs for specific fellowships. If you just do a little bit of a search, you'll come up with some help. And now with ChatGPT, you can just have it write your stuff for you. That was a joke. It was, don't do that, because this needs to be your work. So these are on the file, and you'll have these. In presenting your information, some of them talked about leadership and scholarship and service and how you document that in your application. Don't write a paragraph, because again, if we're the reviewers trying to decide how active you've been in an organization or what volunteer activities you've done, list them, put years in or number of hours that you participate per week. Don't list things that you did 1 hour once, because the reviewers are going to pick up on that, particularly if there's an interview process, as there is with the roads. They'll hone in and they'll ask you about that. So make it easy for the reviewer to see the important pieces of your application. Group similar honors, don't list every scholarship that you've gotten, because most of you have gotten 10 or 15. You know, say you've had university scholarships for a total of X dollars, or you know, something like that. If you had a national Goldwater scholarship, definitely list that. So just think about the reviewer and how they're going to react to what they're seeing. If you've had presentations, use official citations for your degree. They vary. Look at a journal in your discipline and copy that style. Don't use the MLA, because if you're applying in mechanical engineering, that's going to look different than if you're applying in English. So, and your mentor can help you with these as well, but do list all of your publications and presentations, because that adds to your scholarly potential if you've done these things. And if you haven't done them, see if your mentor can't scare up opportunities for you to do that in this coming year, so that it makes your application more competitive. So letters of recommendation, we talked about them. Choose carefully. They must be a research mentor if you're applying for graduate research. If you're like in social work, Kristen, I would assume you had somebody talk about your service or your activities, an internship.
Yes.
So,
I'm like,
you know, need to be appropriate references. Ask them early. You all three said that. They're busy people, but ask them again and again. I have students say, well, I know I already asked you, but could you do this again? Yes, because I just pull out the old one. I don't just submit the new one, because I add the things that are relevant. Katie said, you know, provide a draft of the application so they know what's being asked of you and they can address the right things. You know, help them write that letter for them, but give them time to get it done appropriately. And I've written probably 10, 15, 10 probably is maximum for one person. And it's not a lot of work to do the second, third, or fourth. Must be on a letterhead with signature. I've seen a lot of letters of recommendation just starts out typing. So if they're faculty members, they know that. Staff probably. If it's an internship, they'll use their company. Sorry. Sorry. So what do you do between now and the fall or the spring when you're making these applications? Or several years down the road? Take graduate level classes, if that's an option. Get to know your professors and get involved in undergraduate opportunities. So what kind of things did the three of you do that you think helped your applications?
I think for me, I think it would be my internet connection is unstable. So if I cut out, I'm so sorry. But I think I have like a variety of activities that I was involved in undergrad, as well as a variety of letter writers. I was a psychology major with a minor in English, and I would have people like Dr. Stedman and Dr. Forbes. With Dr. Stedman is in the College of Engineering and Dr. Forbes is organic chemistry, and then I would have psychology people to show that I'm well-rounded. And also for most of the things that I was applying for, they weren't STEM focused, obviously, they were humanities. So to show that I am the range of humanities and I am a range of a person. And I think that always made me interesting, that I wasn't just any girl with a psychology major. I had like a variety of backgrounds.
I think that's something, oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think for me that it was like the way I mentioned earlier, the way I cared about mortar board. you know, I was kind of the one that always like made sure everything was done. So like I stayed in contact with so many people from the national office. You know, they knew if somebody from my chapter was going to contact them, it would be me. So like I feel like just staying involved in that respect kind of played a role. I can't say for sure, but I just feel like my involvement that way with the chapter like definitely probably helped. And then I used some of that in my application, but then also like as far as like the humanities and that kind of thing, one of the biggest things I did was get involved with other organizations at school. And then I worked on an independent research project that I was really passionate about, and just, you know, going into that work because it really described like what I want to do in the future. And it just blended in with, you know, my values, my purpose, and like I said, what I really love and what I'm going to do as a career for a career.
I was going to add, I was someone who did not change my interests. Like I'm in law school and it's something I knew I wanted to do from middle school. And normally I think a lot of applications show an evolution of like, I wanted to do this. I found out it wasn't practical, so I did this. And I wanted to focus on that I still had an evolution, even though I'm doing the same thing. So I would highlight like this summer I did this work and I found out I learned that I really loved this work and this part of it. So then the next summer I did this and I made it part of my story. Because I think a lot of people might look and say, oh, you knew you always wanted to be a lawyer. How do you know now? Like, we're going to send you to law school, but you haven't changed your mind yet. Because so many people are like, undergrads will change their major 4 times. So I wanted to demonstrate that even if I haven't changed my major, I had gone through the consideration of what life as a lawyer and what life in law school would be like, and that I was making a decision that I knew was right for me.
And I think you guys have kind of addressed this one, you know, take the opportunities to be in water board, continue the activities that got you selected for membership. There are other opportunities, you know, that again are relative, and the question early on about volunteer activities. I also am on the medical school admissions committee, and I tell the students that talk to me, you know, when I see that they volunteered at a free clinic, that says a lot to me because that's in their area. If they volunteered at an animal shelter, that's good, but it's not like dealing with people. So, you know, take advantage of the opportunities that are there. I know you've got we've got 200 plus organizations on campus and almost as many volunteer activities. So do things, but it's things you need to be passionate about. It comes through when you're not passionate. You can't talk about these things as being very enriching. If you're looking at study abroad, and Phi Kappa Phi has a number of Fulbright and Phi Kappa Phi have opportunities for you to work abroad or do some more research, take a language. There are various ways that you can present yourself in a good light so that you're more competitive for these options. And as promised, you should be able to pick up this document. And so you get those URLs for those resources. And feel free to contact me. I didn't know we were going to have 2 other presenters today, so I didn't include their names. If you guys would put your names in the chat and contact information. Annie, I didn't put yours in either, so if the 3 of you want to do that. And I will leave this up. I can't, I'm not seeing the chat because I don't have 2 screens. Were there any other questions in the chat?
No, I just, oh, go ahead.
When you go to the QR code, they aren't able to access the document.
Okay.
If you send it to me, I can work with you to get access to it, and then we
Okay.
can send it out
Okay.
to everybody. If you want me to email it to you, drop your email in the chat, and then I'll grab it and send it next week.
Sally, this is Karen Steiner. How are you doing?
Good.
I just wanted to say to everyone, I just hope you're having a great mortarboard conference. I, along with Kay Mackenzie, who's on this forum right now, we read for the National Mortarboard Scholarship. And I know you're looking at huge scholarship or fellowships from National Science Foundations and others, but I just want to say, if you're interested in the Mortarboard Fellowship, it's about what you have given to mortarboard. It's about your service, about how you embody scholarship, leadership, and service. And so a lot of what has been said earlier, and thank you to the recipients that have talked earlier, but it is really what's your passion and how do you shine with mortarboard and what did you do for mortarboard? And that's really, and how are you going to continue that legacy of scholarship, leadership, and service? So anyway, awesome job today, Sally. Thank you so much. And I hope you all, I just wish you the best in your futures, because you will be changing more than the world. Thanks.
I also wanted to add real quick, as a push to applicants, have courage. I know I almost didn't apply for the mortarboard fellowship because I was running out of time and I was stressed. And maybe you think your application's not strong, and self-doubt is a big part of this process. So I encourage you to just apply, put together a solid application and do yourself justice. And I think that with more of that, more people would get more fellowships. So I definitely push all of you to apply and brag about yourself. I think that's also hard, especially for women. So push yourself to be honest about what you've done and just submit the application.
I'll tag on to that. The second applicant from South Alabama wasn't going to apply. And I said, because she knew Annie was applying. And I said, you know, the board picks who they pick, and there's no limit on how many from each chapter. So go ahead, and 2 of them got. So yeah. You can't win a fellowship if you don't apply. So thank you. And let me know if there are any questions, and we'll get the link worked out.
Thank you, Dr. Stedman. I'm not seeing any questions, but again, I wanted to thank you for your presentation, for your thoughtful and thorough insight into the application process, not only for mortarboard, but for other fellowships. And thank you to the 3 panelists who helped really drive home some really key messages. So thank you. We appreciate your time.